Have you ever found yourself suffering in a love that felt real? Not in a bad relationship type of sense or not with the wrong person, but a love that was genuinely there. And yet something inside you kept hurting. Kept waiting for it to end, kept finding ways to make it smaller or push it away or to hold onto it so tightly that holding itself became the wound. If you know that feeling, then this episode is for you. Hello, I'm Dr. RB. I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Florida and New York, and I have a little something called PsyPact, which allows me to practice multi state as well. And I'm your guide through this series. So we are now in series 2 talking about the inner critic. And we've been exploring over the past several weeks how this inner critic is critical, relentless, often invisible inner presence that shapes far more of our lives than we realize. We're going to take a look at where this inner critic comes from. It was born not out of cruelty, but of protection, as we have discussed, in a world that really no longer exists. We've looked at how it wears the costume of perfectionism in high achieving people, keeping the standard impossibly high so that nothing can ever be called enough. We looked at how the inner critic lives in our relationships, shaping who we choose, what we believe, what we deserve, and who we push away and who we hold on to. Today, I want to go somewhere even more specific. I want to talk about why we suffer when we are in love. Yes, not just before love or after love, but I'm talking about in it. Yes, a lot of the times we think, oh, we're in love, everything's wonderful, everything's great, but not for everyone. So, in the middle of something real, something that's present, something that could actually hold us, we are still finding a way to be in pain, to feel not great. This is one of the most disorienting experiences a human being can have because we expect the pain to come from the absence of love. We are not prepared for what it means when the pain is already there inside the love relationship itself. The inner critic has a particular relationship with love. It's not neutral about it at all. It has an opinion, and that opinion was formed a very long time ago, probably before you had words for it. And the opinion goes something like this: love is not safe, not for you, not fully, not without conditions. This belief didn't arrive from nowhere. It was learned in the early relationships where love was available but probably inconsistent. In the moments where you reached for connection and what came back was withdrawal or criticism or simply nothing. In the environment where love felt earned rather than given, where it had to be performed for, maintained carefully, and never fully rested in. The inner critic formed in that environment, and part of what it learned, the part is still carrying, is that love has a price. It has a cost to pay, that it will be taken away from you, that you are not quite the kind of person love stays for. And so now, when love arrives, when someone is actually there, actually warm, actually choosing you, the inner critic does not relax. It gets even more anxious. It watches. It waits for the evidence that it already believes that it will find. These are the patterns that I see most often in people I get to work with when the inner critic is running inside a love relationship. And I want to name them carefully because naming them is the beginning of freedom from them. So the first pattern is hypervigilance. This is the love that exhausts itself watching, monitoring the other person's mood, their tone, the small changes in how they look at you or speak to you, reading everything as potential evidence. Is this still safe? Are they still here? Have I done something that is about to cost me big time? The hypervigilance isn't irrational, it's in its structure. It is the nervous system that's doing exactly what it learned to do in an environment where love was unpredictable, where it was safer to scan constantly than to ever fully trust. But in a present relationship with a present person, this scanning creates a particular suffering because you are never quite in the relationship. You are always slightly outside of it, watching it, monitoring the signals. The love is real and you cannot quite land in it because landing means letting your guard down. And letting your guard down is something the inner critic does not believe is safe. The second pattern that I have seen is self sabotage. This is the one that is hardest to see in yourself because it does not feel like self sabotage from the inside. It feels like honesty or clarity or the reasonable desire to test whether the love is real. What it looks like from the outside, picking a fight when things are going well, or pulling away when someone gets too close, finding fault in the relationship when there is no specific fault to find, pushing to see if the other person will stay. And if they do, finding another push, or maybe push harder. The inner critic drives this because it cannot tolerate the uncertainty of being loved without proof that the love is permanent. Since permanence cannot be proven, and permanence can never be promised, like when someone says, I'll love you forever, the inner critic proposes another strategy. So let me rupture this now on my own terms before the rupture arrives on someone else's terms. Again, self sabotaging. It is not a conscious choice that I want you to be aware. It is the psyche trying to manage an intolerable risk by taking control of the outcome. And if we haven't discussed this earlier, which I believe we have, the inner critic is just one of the many voices in the unconscious or the psyche. The inner critic tends to be what Carl Jung called a complex. And the suffering that it creates, this inner voice, is profound because it puts you in the position of destroying what you most want in the name of protecting yourself from losing it. Doesn't make sense, does it? The third pattern I tend to see is the inability to receive. Someone loves you and you cannot let it in. They offer a compliment, and this happens a lot with many people. You get a compliment, and what do? You deflect it. They offer tenderness, and you find a way to make it smaller. This thing, I've had this for years. You minimize the compliment. They tell you that you matter to them, and you feel underneath the warmth a kind of disbelief, a waiting, a part of you that says, they don't really know me. If they knew me fully, the parts that I keep hidden, those thoughts that you really don't say, the history I carry, they would not still be here. They wouldn't make that compliment. And so the love is always received at arm's length, at a slight remove, appreciated perhaps, but not fully inhabited. This is the inner critic's most direct interference in love. It stands at the door and says, you're not who they think you are, and you believe it, because the inner critic has been speaking longer than the love has. Now, I want to bring in Carl Jung here because he understood something about this that I find very essential. He spoke about the wound, the original place in us where we learned that we were not enough, or too much, or in some way unacceptable. And the observed, that wound tends to repeat. And not because we are broken, but because psyche seeks coherence. It seeks what it already knows, even when what it knows is painful. He called this the repetition compulsion, though he understood it in a deeper way than simply behavioral repetition. He saw it as the psyche trying again and again to return to the original wound in the hope of finally healing it, of finally getting the outcome that didn't come the first time. So it's kind of like a repetition to correct it or heal it. which is the better term. This is why the inner critic's voice in love is so often familiar, why the pain of feeling not enough in an adult relationship can echo precisely the pain of feeling not enough in childhood, because it is the same wound surfacing in a new context, asking again to be finally met. The question the inner critic is really asking underneath it all is watching and testing, and the self protection is this: am I lovable not for what I do, not for how I perform, not for how well I manage to keep myself together, but as actually I am? Am I lovable just who I am in the ordinary, unpolished, uncertain reality of who I am? That is the big question. And the suffering comes from not yet knowing the answer, or from knowing it on a good day and not being able to hold it on the hard days. So, what do we do with this? The first thing, and I cannot say this gently enough, is that we stop trying to fix it alone. The inner critic was formed in relationship. The wound is relational, and the healing, while it requires inner work, also requires the relational aspect to it, or a relationship to heal it. It requires being known by another person. It could be a therapist, a trusted guide, an analyst, sometimes even a partner who has done their own work. And finding that being known does not mean being left. That experience, repeated over time, is what begins to update the inner critic's verdict. Not an argument, not willpower, but experience. Being held and not abandoned. Being seen in the difficult parts and not found to still be worthy of care. The second thing is to learn to recognize the inner critic's voice in the specific moments when it runs in love. So the moment you feel the pull to pick the fight that doesn't need to be picked. The moment someone offers you something good and your first impulse is to find the catch. The moment you are scanning, monitoring, and waiting for the evidence of abandonment that hasn't arrived. In those moments, not to silence the critic, not to tell yourself you're being irrational, but simply to notice, to say, there's the voice. There is that old pattern that I'm used to. I am safe enough in this moment to try something different. It's key here that you practice being observational. The more you observe your thoughts, your emotions, your behavior, the more you increase consciousness. That's the very first step, observing. So that pause, that small deliberate gap between the impulse and the action. So again, the impulse is that inner critic voice telling you something, and the action is what you do with that voice. That space is the gap, and that's where something new becomes possible. So my job as a psychologist, especially a Jungian oriented one, is to increase the gap for people. That's why when I have clients in session and I'm asking them to repeat something over and over, and sometimes the clients are thinking, why is he having me repeat this over and over? Is to increase awareness, to increase the gap. The more we notice new details come into the story or the dream that's being expressed and told in the session, new things start to happen because the gap increases. Now, the third thing is to practice receiving. And I'm not being dramatic here. Let a compliment land without deflecting. See the compliment as a nice cold drink on a hot day. You take it, even if it's water. You sit with the warmth of someone's care just for 3 seconds longer than you usually would before finding a way to make it smaller. Just say thank you and mean it, and let that be enough. For many people, this is very difficult. I understand that. But this is something that has to be practiced, and over time, it will be part of you. Trust me, it will. These are not large gestures, but repeated over time, they are how the body begins to learn what the mind might already know, that you're worthy of love, not conditionally, not in theory, in the actual ordinary present tense of reality in your life. You really are. If today's episode met you somewhere personal, if you recognize yourself in any of these patterns, I want you to know that this work does not have to be done alone, nor should it be. As I mentioned before, this is a relational healing. It has to be done in relationship. Now, to do this, I offer a 90-minute threshold session for exactly this kind of inner work to work with your inner critic. There's a space that we need to look honestly, and this involves the patterns that have been shaping how you love and how you receive love. And this has to be done with someone trained to hold that space with care. If you're thinking of maybe working with someone, I could be that maybe someone if it works. And there's a link in my bio. I also write about this in different newsletters and different links, and I'll have those below. If today's video resonated with you, please subscribe, share, leave a comment, all those things that help the algorithm. And this will help this work find the people that need it. And I thank you so much in advance for being part of that. And as always, remember, this is Dr. RB. You are guided, you are loved, and your path is most sacred. Take good care of your soul.